All right, we're back, and spoiler alerts for Titan Quest 2. About to face one of the final Telkines of this area before we go into the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. I'm very excited for that. Like I'm very excited for this episode. I love CubbyWhole. I highly enjoy this episode. This is, in fact, usually this is what I do. I play Titan Quest and listen to CubbyWhole and get a bunch of very awesome, powerful knowledge. And don't forget, Will Keller, another student of natural law, you could say. He's another guy, another legend on the One Great Work Network. I'll also leave a link to that in the description of this video, so check it out. Will Keller's going live tonight at 9 p.m. Everybody should tune in. I'll probably tune in and play some more Titan Quest. Who knows? Yeah. So here we go.
I think that is very important to try to see it that way, and to use that as a way of understanding that this is what it's about, because doing the great work is going in that circle and getting as much eclectic knowledge as you can in order to see all perceptions of that truth, because it's about aligning with truth. Aligning with truth is getting closer to truth. And obviously there's a lot more to it, but that's one way to look at it. So
yes, I think you explained it very well. I love the metaphor and the correlation to the Arthurian legend and the Round Table and the Grail, and you definitely explained that very well. The truth is objective, and what this means is that it's not determined, and I shouldn't even say determined, but it's not based upon the perceptions of any living being, meaning that perception is a tool that allows you to come into alignment with the truth. And it is a means for you to actually access that information. And this is the thing, is that truth is unwaverable. It is simply that which is, like you stated. But perceptions are capable of wavering. So the truth is that which has occurred in the past and that which is occurring in the present. So it is singular, and we're talking about capital T truth. And there's only one way things actually are, and one way things actually happen. That which is the truth will forever and always remain the truth, no matter what people perceive about it, no matter what people say about it. It doesn't matter. It will always remain that way.
Right.
And just to give a little bit more understanding of perception, a lot of people think perception is reality. Perception is the totality of everything, right? Well, we could look at the Matrix for that and understand like how easy it is to create an illusion for our five senses or our perception, right? And that's why, like, going back to the methodology of the trivium and the quadrivium, why those are so important, because it helps us to see through the illusions that we may be taking in through our perception. And one thing like this is like perception, like view and things like this, like distance. So like if you have a person standing in front of you, like a little child standing in front of you, and you are laying on the ground with a camera and the Eiffel Tower is in the background, it might perceive to be like, you might perceive that little child to be the same height as the actual Eiffel Tower, and like she could be touching the top of it from your point of view, from that angle. But in reality, is the child actually as tall as the Eiffel Tower? Well, no, not really. It's like you can take your fingers and you can hold them up and look at a tree or at a car or something and measure the car that way. Was the car actually that big? Is it actually that distance? Is it that small, as the distance between your index finger and your thumb? Well, no, absolutely not. So perception is not reality, but it is a means for us to gather the knowledge of what reality is and to make use of that. So our work here is to align our perception with reality. And if we take a look at the word perception, it means the act of perceiving, obviously. And perceive comes from the Latin verb percipare, and I believe I pronounced that correctly. And the Latin prefix of that is per, which means through, and the Latin verb sapere or sapere means to take in, to understand. So we understand just by breaking down the word, it means to look through something or to take in the understanding, to come to an understanding by looking through something. So one way that I like to explain it to people is perception is like a lens. And let's say you have bad eyesight and you get a proper prescription for your bad eyesight. What helps you to perceive more clearly that which is that you're trying to perceive. So our perception is a lens for our consciousness, and if our perception is not prescribed properly, or it is murky or cloudy or something like that, then what we see what we perceive to see, we may not understand it the way that we think we actually understand it. So, perception is about becoming aware or becoming conscious of that which is. It is to recognize, to discern, and to understand with clarity, to discover. It is about the awareness of the elements and the environment through physical sensation interpreted in the light of the experience. So, this can also be correlated into intuition and intuitive cognition. A lot of people don't think that intuition is a form of perception, but it is. It definitely is a form of how we perceive things. Sometimes our intuition is really dead on and we can actually intuit something very clearly. And sometimes our intuition may be triggered from past traumas or something like that. I always say, you need to distinguish your past traumas from your intuition, but intuition is also another information and knowledge gathering tool for you to actually make use of reality or what's happening or what possibly could happen as a potential outcome. So another way you can look at this, since we're using the word align or alignment, right? We can look at the truth as a straight line. It's a flat, straight line that is unwavering and unmoving. And we can look at perception as a frequency or, a bandwidth or a wave, right? A wave frequency. So when we lay that wave frequency over a straight line, the lower the frequency, the less the interactions of the intervals onto that line will be. So, if you can imagine with me here, you have a wave and it's really slow and it's elongated and it's, like a low wave frequency, right? And you lay it over a straight line. How many times that wave actually interacts with that straight line will be very few. There won't be that many. But as you raise the frequency, as you raise the perception, as you gain more clarity or you raise your consciousness, you will start to interact with that straight line more frequently. And if you raised it to such a degree that it was indistinguishable from that straight line, then that would be a line. It would be a line. And that's why it's called a line, because you are becoming aligned with truth. And also we could add in a little bit more here, which is the Latin, word ment means mind. So alignment, we're making our line, we're realigning, or we are aligning within the mind to that which is. So I just think that's very important to hammer on there. But going back to something that you did say earlier, Nate, about when people say there's no such thing as truth. Well, this is something I'll be talking about at the Seed event. I'll be talking about presuppositional ideas and worldviews. So the presupposition that the person has laid out, the premise or the idea that they have proposed to you, just like you said, that there is no such thing as truth. And then all you have to say to counteract that, well, is that true? And if they say no from that, well, then obviously you're back to square one, which is that there is such a thing as truth. And if they say, yes, it is true, well, then you can say, well, yes, you just stated another truth. You're back to saying it's truth again. So no matter which way you go with the answers, when you look at that question, you always come back to the truth. And it's a way of dismantling dogma and cognitive dissonance in people. And this is one of the techniques I use quite a bit, is, just simple little presuppositional deconstructions, because their assumption there is that there is such a thing as truth, or there is such a thing that there is no truth. And that is obviously a contradiction. So when we're looking at things, we're looking for the contradictory ideas that we're we're presupposing, and if we're following through with logic and understanding to understand clearly and to not, be erratic or just in some kind of schism with our ideas. And that's something a lot of people don't think about because they don't take a step back and understand what their premise is or their presuppositional worldview is about the idea that they're actually stating. And there's many other examples of this, and hopefully we'll get into a few of those in the future, because that's something I really like to break down, is more presuppositional worldviews. But like you stated it, that's the simplest way to actually deconstruct that idea, is just to say, well, is that true? That there is no such thing as truth. And just to kind of extend upon that a little bit, this goes into some psychopathology, which we could break down in the future as well, but I'll just give a little overview of that, which is, it leads you into this idea of solipsism. And solipsism, in my point of view, is one of the most dangerous psychopathologies that's out there. And just to give a little clear example of what solipsism is here, I'll break that down for you here. Solipsism is from the Latin solus, which means alone, and then the Latin ipse, which is self. So it's the idea of that I only exist. I'm the only person in existence, and everything else is a figment of my perception. Everything else is created through my perception. Even the other beings that I'm interacting with is just something that I have created for my personal experience. And this is like one of the most deplorable things you can say to somebody, is that you don't exist besides as a construct of my own perception. And so it is a delusion. It's a delusion based in one believing that the self can know nothing. So the idea is that solipsism promote, and solipsists like to promote to the public and to, well, it doesn't even matter, because it doesn't matter if they promote it to the public. That's just all a perception, and they're all a figment of their imagination. So is that they can know nothing, is my point here. That's one of the main, crux ideas of solipsists, is that there's no such thing as knowledge, and pretty much that its modifications or anything outside of one's own mind, or one's own perception, I should say, is unsure. Hence, there is no such thing as objective truth, and that that truth does not exist, and it does not matter, and that everybody, like I said, is just a construct of that individual's perception. So solipsists are one of the, well, actually, solipsism is something that is being promoted very heavily in our society. So solipsism is, a very, very dangerous ideology one can live in, because it means that you can go out and you can violate anybody because they don't really exist. It doesn't matter. You could violate natural law. You could do anything that you want to people, and it really doesn't matter. Nothing matters, and there's no such thing as knowledge. So you can't teach people. You can't learn anything yourself besides what you already know in your own limited box of your own perception. And so the idea of this, but here's another idea, right? So let's break down solipsism. The presupposition is that you can know nothing, right? But the idea here is that how could you know that you know nothing? Well, then that dismantles the idea that you know nothing. So that's another presupposition, and how you can break that down, and that, that contradiction in the idea. So nothing is known about X, but yet at the same time, simultaneously, we know something about X, which is that we know nothing about X. So the idea that people even claim that they're solipsists is completely contradictory, because how could they even know that they're solipsists if they can know nothing? It doesn't make any sense. It's completely just backwards and tangled up in cognitive, crap is what it is. It's just utter crap. So, like, how can you say, I am a solipsist, and then say at the same time, I know nothing? It doesn't make any sense. The logic doesn't hold up. And this is why, like, the quadrivium and trivium are so important, because you can break these things down that way. It's mathematical. It's very simple. So another way I like to put this is, imagine, just imagine the hubris and the absolute absurdity in telling other people that they don't even exist. Like I was saying before, it's literally stating that I am God, God of everything. So it's a God complex. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And it's just this whole I mean, I understand why people are buying into it, but it's just so deplorable that people would even think that way. It's very dangerous. It definitely leads to a lot of the ideas that we're fighting against that we are going to be explaining, like moral relativity in the future rather than objective morality, or even subjective morality is also a dangerous thing that, this leads into. And this goes hand in hand with the idea of truth and whether truth exists and whether reality is real and whether, like, everything is just a construct of one's own imagination. So I thought that would be a good correlation to understanding objective truth, because these play off each other. If you don't believe in objective truth, then at some level you're already falling into solipsism, and that's a very dangerous position to be. What do you think about that, Nate?
Absolutely, it is. And, there's a lot of people who definitely, they fall into that whole ideology, but they don't even know it. They don't even know what solipsism is. It's just the effects or the beliefs that they have. You just can know because you know what solipsism is. And also, the thing about truth is that it's, like you've pretty much, perfectly put, it's very simple. Truth is simple. And people don't really like something that's simple. They want to overcomplicate things. So that means that if you try to explain that truth is that which is, they lose their minds because they believe that it's something so much more than that. And yeah, of course, I mean, to explore truth is definitely, it's not that it's complicated, it's a lot of work to understand what it is. And it's a lot of work to, find out how simple it is because we're so indoctrinated and we have lots of mental constructs that have been put into our mind through all this programming from the fantasies of man who want to control and, manipulate the populaces of the earth. So, and that's definitely something we're going to get into also in the future is mind control. And, one thing I wanted to ask you is, what's your take on the dangers of opinionism versus trying to seek the truth? Making your opinion worth knowledge, or saying that, your feelings matter, or my feelings matter in this situation. What is it? What's your take on that type of behavior and how dangerous that behavior can become if one tries to say that their opinion and feelings matter more than you trying to explain what truth is? I want to know like why people have that mentality and why they react that way. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've run into this quite a bit when I'm talking to people about objective truth or any of these principles. Just to kind of, give a little breakdown here as well. Principle means that which comes first, and that is the truth. And people are I think they're in a fear-based consciousness where they, are completely tied up with their emotions so much that they would rather feel these negative emotions or even positive emotions, it could be both obviously, than actually deal with the reality, because they want to live an illusion. Their ego is so caught up in living the illusion, it's so in control, that to actually look at the reality, to look at the truth, would mean they would have to introspect themselves. They would have to look at themselves, and they are scared to actually look at themselves and to say the most powerful words that anybody can say to themselves, which was, I was wrong, So I think the idea of the opinionist or opinionism that people promote, and the ideas that emotions are more important than truth, is a very dangerous position as well, because a lot of people want to feel a certain way, and they will do anything to feel that way. Mostly they want to feel good, but obviously there's some other things like masochists or sadists or sadomasochists, where, you know, sometimes they feel good from actually doing harmful things and things like that, or harming other people. And this becomes a very sexual thing as well when you look into the psychology behind all that. But the idea here is that they would rather sacrifice understanding reality in favor of living the illusion that they have built up about reality and about themselves, because they're scared, because they're in a fear-based mode of consciousness. And I think it's one of the most dangerous positions to be in, when you're putting your emotions before understanding the truth. And I'm sure we all run into this. I'm sure we're all guilty of doing this ourselves at some level. I know I personally am, and it took me a long time to actually get out of that, because this does lead into another thing, which is hedonism. You know, a lot of people, that is a hedonistic point of view. A lot of people just want to live life through pleasure. And to tell you the truth, well, the truth is not always pleasurable. Most of the time, it's very uncomfortable, and it's not something that is going to make you that happy, because unfortunately, the truth about our condition as a species is very, very despotic and very, you know, upsetting to an individual once you actually look at that. And people fear to look at that condition, because then they have to take responsibility for what they are doing to create that condition, because we're all collectively co-creating this condition. And a lot of people don't want to actually, you know, say, hey, I'm doing this as well. I need to change that behavior. They want to continue to do the behavior and then also get a better result, which doesn't work out because they're doing the exact behavior that's giving them the bad result. So that goes back to the idea of meeting requirements for manifestation. But I think it's also a form of mind control in a way. I think we've been programmed. So it's emotional mind control, where we're putting our emotions in front of actually the reality of the situation. Now, I want to make this clear. This does not devalue anybody's emotions. You know, obviously having the emotion is a real experience. You're having an emotion, but what the emotion is about, what you are being triggered to have that emotion from, is that actually what it is? You know, is it a real thing? So I find this a lot in relationships and things like that with people, especially friends or other types of relationships, married couples and stuff like that, where people will feel a certain way about something, but then they will lash out because they feel that way. And then what happens is that the other partner comes in and is like, that's not actually what this is about. This is the truth of that scenario. But then they say, oh, well, it made me feel this way. So, you know, that's what's more important, is that it made me feel this way, not the truth. And it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense, you know? I get that your emotions are valuable, but since your emotion was based off an illusion, then you should understand that that illusion is actually what's creating the stress and the actual negative, response, and maybe triggering you in some way. So we need to really take a firm look at like how many times or how much this actually happens on a daily basis, or even in society. And you'll be astounded about this, like how many people overreact or react based off an illusion, and then they have this emotion from that illusion, and then they go out and they lash out on other people. So it's a really easy way of manipulating people who don't have discipline. They don't have a discipline in their mind, emotion, and actions, So if you can see that somebody is vulnerable to emotional manipulation, which is how the social engineers work at a certain level. They want to emotionally manipulate people so that they're easily controllable and that they react in a certain way. So you could apply the problem, reaction, solution methodology here, where you state there's a problem and then you emotionally react to that problem. Let's say that problem was actually an illusion, and then you go out and you try to do something about that problem, and it plays into the hands of who created that problem. And we can get into that whole, problem, reaction, solution in the future. Also the Hegelian dialectic. Hopefully we can break that down on a future show. But the idea that I'm trying to explain here is that you're more easily controllable and more easily to be manipulated by someone who has knowledge about psychology if you don't have disciplined emotions. So
Absolutely.
we need a state of non-duality between thoughts and emotions. You know, a lot of people have this schism going on in their mind. They think something and then they feel something in the opposite, you know. But what you need is to bring a balance between those two things, and thoughts and emotions are actually unifying and creating the alchemical wedding between the masculine and the feminine, the thoughts and emotions. And then you can have a better result when you put them into use, into reality, and into your actions, right? So what actually comes from those actions will be determined on whether or not you're in balance on the internal realm with these two polarities or these two energies. And you find that one person is either steering towards the, you know, chronic emotional primary ideas and emotional you know, imbalance, or the thinking imbalance. So you have the eggheads, and then you have the absolute, you know, just out of balance, erratic, you know, emotional, whatever you want to call them. I don't even know what you would call them, but just people who are just acting out of their emotions all the time. I think it's very important for anybody to recognize and consciously observe themselves internally, and before you go to react to something, make sure that it's actually true, you know, because reacting may actually cause a lot more harm than what you're hoping for. So I know a lot of people are just trying to find a solution, but usually the way they apply that solution, it tends to be very harmful, you know. So like the old saying goes, you know, good intentions pave the road to hell, right? So you might actually be trying to create a better solution, but you're being emotionally manipulated by social engineers, or even just some abusive, you know, person that you know. And from that, you create more chaos in your own life and more devastation in your own life. But one thing to that also I want to add is that we should never ignore the negative. You know, we should never, absolutely never ignore the negative, because if we ignore the negative, we ensure that we get more of that. And a lot of people don't like that. They fear looking at the negative, and this is part of that emotional mind control, because they fear to look at the truth, because guess what? A lot of the truth has a lot of negativity tied to it, because that's the state of our condition of humanity, which is very unfortunate, but that's why we're doing these things, is to change that state. Obviously, there's very beautiful things going on in the world. I'm not trying to overgeneralize here and say that everything going on in the world is negative and things like that. But I am saying that the vast majority of society that humanity is creating, is very negative. And I'm pretty sure most of us know this by now.
Most people really just don't want the truth. They want, you know, just constant reassurance that what they believe is the truth. And so everything you just said is exactly so true. And that's what people don't want to hear. They don't want to, you know, think about what's going on right now with the elections. And, you know, you see most people are having emotional responses rather than doing the homework to understand how this all works, and how, you know, there is this underlying, this hidden reality that people just do not want to face, because it's a very dark place, and they don't want to face that. They don't want to accept it. They just don't want to see, period. So what they do is they dismiss anyone who's trying to come forth with something that's combative, which is truth, and they would rather just be, you know, emotional and respond to these politicians who are emotional, or, you know, who are going after their emotions. But once you understand the truth that these people are, you know, they're not supposed to be, you know, representing you, because it's not true in nature. No one can represent you. Well, then you start to see that society is mostly reactive with their emotions. And they're not looking at this through, as you said earlier, through a clear lens. They have, you know, they haven't got their prescription glasses yet. A great movie, a great allegory for this is They Live. If you haven't seen that, you definitely got to see it. That is that movie
They
really
live. We
gives you the
Steve.
idea that most people are not putting on the quote-unquote glasses, if you will, and they're not seeing the truth. They're not seeing because their vision is blurry, because they haven't done enough work, so they're just reacting with emotion, like what they think they see, what they think they know. And it's very important that people really try to do the hard work to know, because to not know and to go out with emotion, you know, you're going out blindly, and you're going to be, you know, you're in a fight and you're just wailing at, you know, all over the place instead of actually like focusing and, you know, hitting your target. Well, you're really not making any progress, and you're gonna get laid out, so to speak. And so that's really what's happening here, is people just want that constant reassurance of what they believe to be the truth. And it's always the most dangerous way of believing, because you're never going to understand what's really happening here, and you're always going to be living a life that isn't aligned with something that's genuine and something that's factual, something that's, you know, what people don't want to hear is correct, because obviously we will all want to believe that what we're doing is correct and good. And I'm not here to say that the way that I live my life is perfect, you know, correct. It's just more of like, I'm trying every day to live my life in alignment with that which is good, that which is right, that which is true. And it's hard because we have base desires. We want to, you know, just live the way we want to live with no repercussion. And that's a really hard thing to do, or a hard way to live, is to try to align with the better way to live. And, you know, that's just, it's the truth. So before we go any further, I just wanted to say we only have a few minutes left. So Brandon, you can go ahead and add on to that, and then and you can carry us out.
All right. Yeah, just a couple other things I wanted to say about the truth, and maybe we'll continue this conversation into the next podcast, is that, you know, for our species to evolve here, we have to understand the truth. There can be no evolution without us coming to a conscious understanding of the truth. And a great quote by a wonderful author that I highly recommend, his name is Albert Churchward, and he says, "One only has to think and understand that the pursuit and acquisition of the truth is of infinite concernment to mankind and the society and the evolution of the human race, and the origin and beliefs and meanings of all the doctrines found throughout the world. By the cultivation of our reason, we are better enabled to distinguish good from evil, as well as truth from falsehood. Both of these matters are of the highest importance, whether we regard this life to come or the next life to come." And that was a little paraphrasing there, but that's pretty much what he said. So what he's talking about here is that, you know, truth is the most important thing that we can understand. And I feel that parents are not teaching children this as they're raising their children. You know, I wasn't taught this when I was a child, and I was raised more as a libertarian or anarchist. I wasn't taught that the truth is the most important thing that I could learn. It was, you know, nothing that I heard. I never heard anybody say that to me when I was a kid that I can recall, that the truth is absolutely the first thing and the most important thing that you need to learn. I had to learn that myself because, you know, honestly, the people that came before me weren't taught that either, and many, many generations before that. So we've been so conditioned to think that truth is, you know, it doesn't exist, or it's all subjective. And that puts a devaluation on the truth, meaning it doesn't really matter. And there's no point in understanding any of this. But then they try to send you to school to learn all this knowledge about, you know, about all this math and about all this history and stuff. And they're like, oh, you need to learn all this stuff. But they never give you the firm, you know, first of all, the tools that you need in order to filter through that knowledge to come to a correct understanding. And the other thing is they don't emphasize the critical importance about how, the truth and how we utilize truth in this realm. So they don't tell us how important that is for us. And the truth is a beautiful thing when you understand it. It's the most beautiful thing, even though sometimes it's scary and sometimes it's negative. It's the most glorious thing one can come into contact with, because it helps to raise consciousness. It helps to better the species. It helps to evolve our race here and helps to make us better people so that we can be better to the environment and better to other animals and other things in the environment, right?
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to add that into there.
Yeah, man, you're right on. You're right on point. It is the most important thing that we could ever understand. Are we ever going to reach 100% truth? I don't necessarily believe that to completely know the whole truth of the whole picture. But I don't think that's what it's really about. It's just about understanding that we have to discover principles, and then we have to, learn from those principles and learn from the laws that we discover. And once we do, that's when we're aligning and getting closer and closer to truth, so that way we can prosper, and that way we can live in harmony with each other. And that doesn't mean that things are going to be so great and so amazing. It just means that we're just appreciating life at its full potential. We're really having a deeper understanding of how nature really works. And that's a very powerful thing to feel. And I'm working on that every single day, trying. So, but I just want to say that's all we have time for today, guys. So we appreciate you listening, and we also hope that you found this show interesting and beneficial. Also, please check out CubbyWhole.com. That's CubbyWhole.com. And you'll find more shows, videos, news, and pretty much all the information about the Seed Conference coming up in May. So thank you, and have a great day.
All right, there you have it. Another great episode in the books. I absolutely love this podcast. Man, such great stuff. So don't forget, like I said, thanks for tuning in, first of all. And if you made it this far, stay tuned. Will Keller will be live tonight going on at 9 p.m. And also, if you're in the northern Indiana area, be sure to come out to Michiana Education and Arts Club. We're having an awesome comedy night. We're going to have Jack Hole there amongst some other great comedians. So be sure to support your local venue, because the pandemic ended up shutting a lot of venues down. So support that, and then I think the next week after that might be a punk rock show. I can't remember, but yeah. So thanks for sticking around. Be sure to check out. We're gonna do the third CubbyWhole episode coming up here soon. But I also want to do some Call of Cthulhu gameplay that I'm going to get onto sometime this week. Maybe I might start it this weekend. Who knows? It's all up to nature. You know how it is. All right. Thanks for tuning in.